Welcome back to our second episode of SARCan, Canada's volunteer search and rescue podcast. For volunteer SAR, about volunteer SAR, by volunteer SAR, and brought to you by Axiom Mutual Insurance. My name is Patrick Armstrong, and beside me here is my co-host once again, Spencer Whitelaw.
Hello, Patrick. Clearly, we've somehow made it to our second episode, so the producers haven't pulled us just yet, so we'll just keep rolling. Last episode, I was so rude and I didn't ask anything about you or your history or why you got into search and rescue. So why don't you tell our lovely listeners why you're here?
Well, I don't say no to too many spotlights, but I come with a Army and Navy background and got into first response. I've been volunteering, I think, since my days in the Navy. It's probably started with the ship's newsletter and then worked my way to adopt a sailor. We worked with a local public school to write to sailors that were overseas when we were deployed, and then got into first response. And as you know, in 2018, myself and Adam Seltzer started the Huron Area Search and Rescue, been involved in SAR, and as you mentioned last episode, it's quite a bit of money and gear, if nothing else.
Yeah, even though we're two drastically different generations and cohorts, we have that in common, that we like spending our money on a bunch of gear.
Drastically?
Well, the listeners can't see us, so they should know that we're very different generations.
Is that obvious, is it? I had an album. I talk about my first album and you talk about your first download.
Yep, pretty much.
This week, we're going to be talking about ice rescue. We have some exciting guests, and we'll be right back after our sponsor and our SAR Spotlight. This episode's sponsor is Access Rescue. Since 2003, Access Rescue has provided services including NFPA 1006 rope, swift, and ice water rescue services and training to the private sector, emergency services, community colleges, municipal, provincial, and federal agencies.
So today we have Alan Hobler of Kamloops Search and Rescue joining us to talk a little bit about his role in his organization. Alan, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Alan, what can you tell us about Kamloops Search and Rescue?
Yeah, we're a team in the interior of British Columbia. We're kind of a moderate-sized team in the perspective of SAR teams in British Columbia. We're situated about a 4-hour drive from Vancouver. SAR teams in the interior are kind of spaced out a bit. Our neighboring teams are at least an hour away. We've been a team since the mid-70s and sort of a ragtag of outdoors enthusiasts recognized there was a need for a search and rescue team. Since then, the team has grown considerably and we've become more and more professional. Now we have a membership of close to 50 and we participate in close to 70 call-outs a year now.
I follow you on social media and you guys have been busy, especially the last couple weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Our local ski hills put in a new chairlift and that's provided some access to the backcountry. So we've been called out a couple times a week over the last couple of weeks of people skiing out of bounds and getting lost.
And is that where you find the majority of your missing persons are skiers, or is there a certain type?
It really varies for us. And I know the bigger teams around Vancouver, their searches are very specialized. They're often called out to the same trail to the same location time and time again. For us, typically it is very diverse and we rarely go to the same place twice. Out of bounds skiers has been an issue in the past and that's being fixed. However, with this new chairlift, they're still trying to address how skiers are getting out into the backcountry there. But yeah, typically we never go to the same place more than once.
Awesome. And Alan, yourself, how long have you been a part of Search and Rescue? Why are you still staying in Search and Rescue? What's keeping you here? And how have you enjoyed working with Kamloops SAR?
Yeah, absolutely. I have the passion, as do most of our members. We're all very enthusiastic volunteers. I've been with Search and Rescue for 20 years now, and when the phone rings in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, my heart still skips a beat, and I jump out with this let's go enthusiasm, and I can't believe I still do that, but I do, and I know most of our other members are like that too. I've been with Kamloops Search and Rescue for 14 years, and I've been a SAR manager for 14 years. So when I relocated to Kamloops, I joined the team, and shortly after I joined, the other SAR managers all left, and they moved away and sort of left me holding the bag. And I so appreciated that opportunity. It's been such a good fit for me joining Kamloops.
Awesome. Nothing makes me happier than to hear that somebody still has the same drive and passion for their role that they did 2 decades ago. It's great to hear that when that phone goes off in the middle of the night, it's excitement and not dread or inconvenience. Being a part of a volunteer organization, we all have other different, also equally important things going on in our lives. So for you to be able to give up certain pieces of your life to dedicate to this organization is wonderful, and I'm glad you still have that same passion and drive that you did 20 years ago.
Yeah, thanks.
And Alan, on behalf of us here at SARCan, we just want to say thank you for calling in. I know there's a little bit of a time difference between Ontario and BC, and we want you and your team be safe, and thank you for everything you do to the community.
You're welcome.
We have two well-trained guests on the air today, Captain Rich de Grandpre from the London Fire Department and Hazer's own rescue captain, Jeff Fitchett. Jeff is also the Director of Operations and Training and an instructor with Access Rescue. Thank you both for joining us today.
Morning, guys. Thanks for having us.
Rich, we'll get right into it. Tell us a bit about yourself and your role in the London Fire Department.
Myself, I've been with London Fire for 24 years, approximately, roughly. I'm a captain on Engine 2 right now. I'm the team leader of our platoon's ice water team, and I'm also the team coordinator for the ice and water team for the entire job, which means I kind of keep between the 4 platoons and their 4 teams, and between administration, I'm kind of the middleman as far as purchasing new equipment, figuring out what we need as far as equipment, figuring out our training and different types of situations like that.
And Jeff, tell us about yourself and your roles in Hazer and with Access Rescue.
Yeah, certainly. I'm the rescue captain for Huron and Area Search and Rescue's Special Operations Rescue Team. I'm also an instructor for BSAR under OSARVA. I'm a top rope belay instructor, and I'm the Director of Operations and Training with Access Rescue. I teach tower rescue, high angle rope rescue, swiftwater ice rescue. Those are some of the disciplines that I do, and I'm a mountaineer, rock climber, and pretty much anything outdoors.
Rich, a bit of an oxymoron, but tell us about ice rescue and what that looks like in the fire world.
It's a challenging thing in the fire world, I guess, right? It's one of the services we provide in London. To me, the big challenge with ice rescue is the environment today. Like there may not be ice for a season, and then next season everything may be completely frozen right up. So it's the challenge, and the way it looks to me is as far as keeping the training up based on the environmental conditions that are offered to us, as far as being able to get out and train and make sure everyone's got their skills up to the proper levels for when those situations do arise.
I never thought of that until you just brought it up, that you're right. We could go one season where everything's completely frozen over, and then the next season nothing ever does. So I can't imagine trying to keep that standard.
Even last winter it was a pretty warm winter. We didn't have a lot of opportunity to train, and I believe it was a Monday and one of the squads went out and did their ice training. But by the time we came in on Thursday, the ice was gone, right? So that's how hit or miss the ice rescue kind of season is for training. It's very, you got to jump on the ice and get on it when it's available, and make sure you get the practice in and the training in as far as bringing new members up to speed and keeping the experienced members, enough, having their JPRs done and kept up to date for the provincial standards.
Absolutely. And we're on a real acronym kick with this podcast. What's a JPR? Just so I can add that to my list.
Job performance review. So it's just kind of like skill checks, right? It's our
Nice.
skills, starting from a new guy would be very basic, right? The introduction to the PPE, to the systems, the ropes, the equipment, and then bringing them up from an awareness level through operations up to a technician level is when they're fully qualified in London to go and perform the actual rescues.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. We learn tons of new acronyms, and you may not know this, but I like to climb on fire trucks as a part-time hobby. And so now I can speak some more lingo to get myself on there. Jeff, speaking of the acronyms, NFPA 1006, what is it and what does it mean in regards to training?
Certainly. Well, 1006 pertains to all technical rescue training. And as Rich had just touched on, there's levels: awareness, operations, and technician level training. And that is the standard for fire services. What I've noticed is a lot of police, marine units, police, military, industry adopt NFPA standards. They're not required outside of a fire service, but it's a good standard. And yeah, the awareness, it just touches on a basic understanding as it pertains to ice rescue. It'd be understanding ice, understanding basic hazards, and a little bit about hypothermia and things like that. And then you get into operations, which is about self-rescue, shore-based rescues, and you hazard analysis, site assessments, and things like that. And then when you get to technician level, that's when you're not only having an understanding of all awareness ops, but then you're getting into leading exercises and being able to do advanced or apply advanced techniques to ice rescue and other technical rescue disciplines. But all in all, the NFPA standards, they kind of come about with, like, they're written in blood, if you will, where past accidents will dictate improvements and inquiries, and that's where NFPA, really comes into being.
And Rich, what does the OFM 2028 certification mean for rescue services, and what does it mean for you?
So for us, it's a goal we're working towards right now. It just means it puts us on par with the province as far as, making sure that we're aware and we're comfortable that our training standards have met the requirements of the provincial certifications and that we're on the same level as all the other services, fire services or police services or, search and rescue services that provide the same type of water rescue services that we're looking to provide in London. So it's a good goal. It's going to take us a couple of years to get there. We're starting to put it together now with some training packages through the OFC and such, and then we'll be able to come back and deliver that down to our members, so that by 2028 we're all certified and we're all up to the proper regulations and everyone's on the same page.
I wouldn't mind jumping in on this. Yeah, the standardization of training is a good idea and it's a good goal to have. The reality of the mandate is that centers that have large budgets, like such as London or a lot of the cities in the GTA and stuff, they have the ability to afford training. What I've noticed is smaller municipalities, rural volunteer units, and stuff like that, they just don't have the training budgets. And it's a bit of a problem. What I'm noticing is that these departments are now relying on agreements with, departments such as London Fire to help back up technical rescue training. And yeah, when it comes to technical rescue, it's very expensive to run these programs and to train all staff. And so it's great that there's a standardization being put in, but there is going to be a problem. And that's where outfits such as, Huron Area Search and Rescue, London Search and Rescue, and so on are helping out and being a backstop for other areas.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. These sorts of emergencies can happen anywhere at any time. They don't discriminate. They're not going to occur in the areas with the greatest, densest populations and the most resources. So it's important that we work together with our neighbors to help bridge the gaps to be able to provide the same service regardless of where it is in Ontario or the nation.
Yeah, no, very true.
All right, Jeff, you see a lot of people at Access, both professional, private, and volunteers. What is it you look for in a volunteer, either at Access or in Hazar?
Well, I think it comes down to individuals that you trust, like people who are team players, who are reliable, who will execute on tasks, who act professionally. I think that's crucial. I find with technical rescue, especially ice rescue, you really want to trust the people that you're working with because it is a dangerous type of discipline to perform.
And Rich, when you're looking at the ice rescue platoons and firefighters in general, what's a good fit for personality? If somebody listening is interested in fire, interested in the ice rescue side of that, what are things that they should be trying to work on or things that you look for?
As far as, say, for our own members, when we're opening up the team for new members who have been on a few years, they're comfortable already with the job of a firefighter. They've got a level of skill and level of comfort from being just a firefighter, and then they're looking to join one of our teams that we have in London. As far as the ice part or the water part, obviously, like Jeff was saying, team player is huge. None of this stuff that we do is an individual task or an individual event, right? Everything's based on teamship and partnership, a level of comfort on the water, around the water, on the ice. When we're in the water, especially on the ice, we wear these Ice Commander immersion suits. There's not a lot of dexterity. They're very bulky. They're very hard to operate. So you got to have a level of confidence and comfort to wear that in the water or on the ice, when the hazards are at a high level. But just like everything on our job, team player is number one for sure.
Yeah.
And Rich, with your career spanning approximately 24 years. I imagine you've seen a lot of changes over that time, both good and negative. What are some positive things that you've seen in terms of either equipment or policies or procedurals? What are some things that have happened? How ice rescue has developed over the years?
So I've been on in London for 24, but I think I've been probably on the water team for, I'm thinking probably 16 or 17 years. I started when I was younger on the job. They were looking for new members for our platoon, so I put my hand up and I got on the team. But over the time, obviously the PPE has kind of changed a little bit, right? Everything gets better over time. The JPRs, just the rules and regulations of training, the experiences too, right? A lot of our training is based off of experiences from previous, I don't want to say generations, but previous levels of guys coming up through the team. So that's where a lot of our training is based on. So everything gets better over time and everything improves with experiences that everyone else has had in the past, where we can all build on and get better from learning from each other.
I agree. And I think that's where that lack of ego really comes into play, where everybody's a team player. They want to share their experiences, good and bad.
Yeah, I agree. We had a guy got hurt a little bit, but he's not shy about not wanting to talk about it. He wants to go out and explain to everybody what happened and, how to prevent this thing and, kind of the story so that everyone can benefit from his experience from a call. So we have to be able to willing to share our experiences and learn from our experiences. Otherwise, it's a shame, right? If we don't learn from accidents and mistakes, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. We have to have the confidence in ourselves to be able to share that information and make sure that everyone can benefit from those experiences, both positive and negative.
I agree completely with what you're saying, Rich. And two major accidents happened within ice rescue within the last just over 20 years, where there was two fatalities in two different situations, and that's definitely lessons were learned. And you don't want to do ice rescue in moving water and getting out there and do go rescues, and things have improved in that respect. Yeah, just constantly learning. I find with access rescue, we train a lot of fire departments, and you just pick up unique little skill sets that people have developed over decades, right? And you can incorporate that. And we constantly learn and adjust and add to our repertoire of skills when we're teaching ice rescue. This season, we'll probably have over 40 days of ice rescue booked. I'm at 38 days so far of training booked this season. And it's just every day is different. Every ice changes on a daily basis. Like I was up in North Bay these past 4 days, and each day was slightly different. And so the more you train and the more you can kind of roll with different conditions.
It really, with my limited ice operations course, which you're going to be retraining me this February, Jeff, ice changes by the hour, depending on the temperature and the water. And
Yeah, it certainly does. And we train all over the province. So I'll be up in Red Lake in January and having to use a chainsaw to cut through the ice. Whereas if you're doing it in the GTA, you might be swimming in just cold water. And then the next day it'll freeze, or later in the afternoon. Like, who knows? It's just, it changes so rapidly, as you said.
Jeff, what does the future in ice rescue look like?
Well, I kind of alluded to it a little bit before, where I think the major centers will have dedicated ice rescue teams through their fire service and police marine units. I think rural areas are going to be underserved. I think there's a big problem going on. I'm speaking with volunteer departments all the way up to like Moose Factory, Moosonee, Kenora, Fort Francis, and everything in between. And it's just those budgets are really tricky. And the call outs are so few and far between in a lot of areas. And it's, again, municipal budgets are stretched. And it's very costly, especially out in these northern and northwestern regions, to get training, because it's just, there's not a lot of training providers out there. It just, other groups such as search and rescue outfits pulling up slack in other types of organizations, I think will be having to pull weight. So I think that's kind of the evolution of ice rescue training. As Rich touched on, gear is always improving. Knowledge just on the effects of cold and stuff like that. That's always, research is continuing on that front. Supports are improving.
I think we can speak to that in the Huron Area Search and Rescue as the person dealing with the budget. I have 4 different streams that I have to pay for a volunteer SAR, and rope rescue and marine take up the majority of that budget. because everything we're purchasing has a lifespan, and we're already planning for how do we replace it. If I have to get in one more leaky suit, my poor feet aren't going to take it. But I know with the volunteers, everybody's busy, and getting volunteers to maintain that high standard is, I think, a challenge that all volunteer organizations have. Rich, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can see that challenge. I think in London we're fortunate, right? We run 4 platoons over our rotations. And in London, every platoon has got minimum 12 dedicated ice water guys. So we're very, very fortunate. It's interesting you talk about the volunteer type of communities, right? Because we're a bigger city, but then we're surrounded by smaller towns, which are full of volunteer communities. So I'd be interested to see the future if there is a development of, I know mutual aid exists, but how automatic is it, and how much, do they know that we even have water ice rescue, say, or swift water rescue, or surface water rescue, or those other kinds of services as well that London does run every day, and we kind of take it for granted, to be honest with you, that it's there. Our training schedule set up every 4 weeks. Each special team gets their week of training. The team leaders make a plan based on the environment and the weather, and what Mother Nature has given us that week, and we go out and do our training. But it is something we take for granted. So it's interesting to hear from kind of the volunteer side of things how much of a stretch it is sometimes, or a challenge it is to keep skills up, and even equipment, right? Like, if we need suits, we get them not super easy, but fairly easily. If I need to order for 3 or 4 suits, I can order them, kind of thing.
Just on the gear front, it's the more you train in the gear, especially with ice rescue, they take a beating. I just had 30 suits serviced, and I'd say a third of them were put in the garbage. And I had one suit that had 15 pinprick holes that were all fixed. And it's just maybe 30 days of training, but they cost a lot to maintain. Anything with rescue associated from a gear perspective, it comes at a price tag that's pretty immense.
Absolutely. And could you imagine, Jeff, us trying to get 12 volunteers? We can't guarantee that we could produce 12 volunteers at a call for rescue. Simply work schedules, everything else with volunteers. So yeah, that's interesting to hear on the fire side for that. For both of you, and I know we've touched on it through the conversations, what specific challenges have you personally faced in ice rescue, be it training, physical, or real callouts? Jeff, we'll start with you.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I can speak to it pretty immense because I do a lot of ice rescue training. It's extremely physical. You're contesting with a bunch of different factors. Weather. Like it was minus 15 with blowing wind on Lake Nipissing this week. And so you can, I had glasses on, but other participants didn't. And so people are getting cold. It's just the elements will get you. Also, ice is slippery. As soon as water gets on top of ice, slips and falls happen. I always find that I have bruises everywhere with technical rescue training. It's just a nature of the beast. And when you're working in a training environment, you're doing tons of reps. And so yeah, I got a cut on my nose. And it was not the best. It's just very physical. I think people have to be in shape for it. Self-rescuing, hauling, just even egressing a patient that's say a kilometer out and bringing them back to like EMS. It's just very physical. Now, you can train for this. As you know, I like doing cold plunges and stuff. So cold is not my weakness, if you will. But a lot of other people, if they get flushed, it's a setback for people.
Yeah, you're kind of sick when it comes to the cold plunges. I try to keep up, but it's a difficult task for me. Rich, for yourself, what challenges have you personally faced in that?
Personally, I'm thinking I got to agree. I think the physicality of the training, it's tough, it's cold. Keeping everyone kind of busy at the time. And then they're making training as realistic as possible too. We all train with each other. So we're obviously all wearing full PPE with PFDs on and helmets and ropes, safety ropes attached to us. So when you go like if I go grab my partner, to simulate a rescue or whatever, there's lots of stuff to grab onto when he's fully geared up in proper PPE as well. Whereas when we're doing this for real, most people are either wearing a pair of track pants and a hoodie or something like that. And a 250-pound person who's cold and can't help themselves, that's a lot. There's not a lot to grab onto, and there's not a lot of help coming back from that person. So we got to understand that when we're doing our training, it's kind of cheating if I go and grab my partner by the PFD, because no one we're technically probably going after is going to have a big chunky PFD to grab onto. They've got a skinny T-shirt or a hoodie on at best, and it's a challenge to get hands on these patients and getting back into our boats or our RDCs or whatever we're using at the time.
It's very well said. And I'd also add in communication. It's I find when you're working on water or near water, it's really hard, especially with the ice commanders where you have a hood on, and wind. It's just communicating, especially if you're ways away from the working platform. I was a casualty this week, and I bet it was about 150 meters out where I was, and the rescuer who was doing the go rescue was having a devil of a time communicating and getting proper haul and stuff like that. It's really, really important to get that dialed in, because it's at one point I was being absolutely crushed against the ice fence, and I'm like, listen, you're going to drown me if you guys keep pulling. And these are prospective firefighters. This wasn't a fire service. And so I find fire services that work together all the time, they're more dialed in on that. But when you're teaching people, SAR groups and things like that, communications is one challenge that I see all the time. And then another thing to keep in mind too on the volunteer side is recoveries. It's first responders who are dealing with this frequently. They have more supports. They have camaraderie with their platoon and what have you. And it's a lot of volunteers are just everyday different types of jobs not related to rescue. And that's a little bit of it's heady, I guess you could say, for others, with just the anticipation of finding a deceased person. And that's just another little nuance that there's an anxiety that I've noticed with recoveries.
And it is a difference. That's why it's volunteer search and rescue as opposed to search and recovery. And I know in the Huron area search and rescue, we've had those conversations where, okay, our role's done here. We've been here 1-2 days. Now it transitions to fire or dive units and what have you in water, because it's a recovery and it's something that we don't want to put volunteers into if we don't have to.
Yeah, for sure.
And Jeff, you raise an interesting point there about the dynamics between being a part of a volunteer team where you all have many other obligations in life pulling you in different directions, and sometimes you can't make a call out, versus the full-time paid teams where you're going every time it comes in, and the level of training and involvement that you have with one another too. I mean, Rich, from his perspective, I imagine the people he trains with a lot. He's very familiar with their strengths and weaknesses and abilities and how everybody functions in a team dynamic. You may not necessarily get that in the volunteer realm, where it's kind of luck of the draw of whoever's available is kind of going, and everybody works a little bit differently, even though we're all trained to the same standard. So that's certainly a difficult dynamic that you may have to stick handle your way through on a live call.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, to piggyback on that, like Rich's team, they have roles that are kind of predetermined. And whereas with a call out with us, it's whoever shows up first is incident command for our Hazar group, right? And then as people show up, then the more senior person will take over running our team, if you will. But the levels of training vary across our sort. The bare minimum is rope ops, but you could have people show up with just ice rescue awareness. They can't do hardly anything. They can be there for moral support and handling gear and stuff like that. But it's not until you have operations that you do like shore based and self rescue type stuff. But then you need a tech to go out and do an actual rescue on a sort call initially, and if it's prolonged, more people will show up. But there is a challenge there for sure.
And the leadership side too. When we're dealing with fire departments, police departments, EMS, there's a natural progression in leadership that comes with each level that you go to that in the volunteer world isn't always there.
Yeah, we're pretty fortunate. You start obviously as a probationary, and you kind of move your way up, and as your career develops over time, your levels of responsibility and leadership, those opportunities present themselves. And yeah, it's a good progression as you're getting comfortable in your level, and the next level is in sights kind of thing. So you start thinking about that level and you start paying attention to what those kind of guys are doing. We're fortunate when we go out to a water call, we have a district chief. We'll have the first in pump for that area in on the call as well, and then our water team will show up. And we have team leaders, alternate team leaders, and then we have our rescue kind of staffing, I guess is how you would call it. So we are pretty fortunate as far as the staffing we have and kind of the level of ranking and the level of, we know everyone that we need is going to be there based on every position that needs to be filled. It's kind of already established kind of that day.
And I think this goes back to rural areas where I think it will be problematic because I know that volley departments right now, the certification process doesn't really impact just yet. They're trying to prepare for it, but we've got this closing window. And I think that will be how this plays out will determine what happens in rural locations going forward. I think underserviced is likely going to be the outcome. Just what I'm seeing, because I shouldn't say all, but a lot of the big departments are still working through certification. Like I don't know of a department yet that has completed every discipline.
I would think so. I know we're working towards it through our tech rescue team, and I believe our hazmat team still has a couple boxes to get checked off as well. It's definitely a work in progress.
Now, both of you gentlemen are clearly very dedicated to your crafts, and for that, I express my appreciation. Rich, we'll start with you. What made you want to get into the fire world?
That's probably being a 7-year-old and seeing fire trucks running down the road. I was signed in right there. That's where I was bought in at that time. Yeah.
What's kept you in the role then?
Just always, the next challenge, moving up to the next level, mastering kind of the level where I'm at. And then with the next level on the horizon, trying to learn from the guys that are there at that time, pick up what I can learn from those guys before I get into that level. But I just love the challenge. I love the camaraderie of it. It's just, there's nothing like it. I don't know. It's hard to explain. There's nothing like it.
And when you're hopping in the truck going lights and sirens to a call, how's that 7-year-old Rich inside you feel?
Can't punch a smile off his face.
Awesome. And Jeff, with your dedication to search and rescue, tell us what got you into that world and what's keeping you here.
Yeah, do you know what? As a little kid, I started camping and then started climbing. As a teenager, I started doing 150K, 36-hour adventure races and just progressed. I had written on a notepad when I was in my early 20s that I wanted to teach basically swiftwater rescue, rope related stuff, like climbing and mountaineering. And it's just like, I think I turned the TV on maybe 10 times this whole year. I kind of have ants in my pants. I'm passionate about rescue training. Every single rescue situation is different, and you've got to think outside the box. It's mentally stimulative, it's physical. There's always a challenge working with people. I love the camaraderie. I just love doing hard things. I enjoy the satisfaction of it. And I love the idea of training people to save lives. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, it sounds like we've got the right people in the right positions here. You're both incredibly dedicated to what you do. And for that, I thank you for your involvements here, both in the services that you provide and the continuing education and training that you provide to people who are following the same career paths as yourselves as well, to keep that generation of rescue and public safety going. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Before we go, we'd like to do our shout out, or what we call These Are the People in Your Neighborhood, a section where we mention volunteer from across Canada. This time we'd like to highlight Kathleen O'Brien from the Ottawa Volunteer Search and Rescue. Along with her commitment to her team, Kathleen is part of the board for the Ontario Search and Rescue Volunteer Association and has to put up with a lot of my emails back and forth. So, Kathleen, thank you for all that you do.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Spencer, another great episode. I keep thinking, though, that we need some sort of tagline for the end, sort of a party on, Spencer, party on, Patrick. What do you think?
You know what? With our luck, we'd probably run into something that's trademarked and we'd probably bankrupt this entire organization. So maybe we'll play it safe, but maybe a jingle, or is that asking for the same trouble?
I think anybody that listens to us sing. SARCan is driven by your suggestions and comments. So please, if you have an idea for a topic or you're a subject matter expert and you'd like to come on, or you want to highlight your SAR unit or somebody within your team, contact us on our social media or at sarcan@hazar.ca. On behalf of Spencer and I, we just want to say thank you for all your commitment towards your community and to be safe.